I guess that's like a philosophical argument. I mean, to be fair, like you can reverse entropy for like a given location. That's always been the case, right? Like your motors are like ACs work that way in the sense that an AC will create cold air and then pump hot air outside. So for like the local system, the AC reduces entropy. It's just that on like a global scale, the AC produces more heat than the coldness it gives to like your room. So if you're okay with increasing like the entropy outside, you can decrease the entropy inside. Yeah, the idea that, oh yeah, cells probably came into existence as a way to like break down the complex chemical compounds that exist into simpler compounds, and we use like the sun rays as a way to do it. But life fundamentally does increase entropy just by existing as a chemical process. Yeah, but that's because it converts something that has higher energy than it into lower energy, right? It's like a conversion process. Like life exists because the sun gives us excess energy. If we didn't have a way of getting energy from the sun, life couldn't exist. I agree. Like we increase entropy and we increase entropy and still continue to exist as a stable pattern because we get extra energy from the sun when we, create and or when we increase entropy of our system. We can't know for sure. We can just like guess based on our current understanding of the world.
It's a good point. I thought it would. I think the way that like a lot of people think of immortality is they think of like immortality of their identity, which is why a lot of people are willing to take, for example, like digital immortality. But as we saw in the story, maybe this is spoiling a few stages down, but eventually, sort of all humans lose their individual identity in favor of a sort of collective identity, right? So in that sense, they actually like didn't gain immortality, right? So I guess yeah, it is an interesting thing to think about, like what it actually means for the humans in the story to gain immortality.
I feel
Uh,
like technically no one can be immortal. They just gained eternal youth. I think probably is a more accurate way for us to think
yeah,
about
yeah.
what it is.
I think it's like incorrect that their sort of identities gained immortality, right? Like so far as we can, I think like a person is much closer to like what they act like than a sort of physical being. Like yeah, their physical bodies. Yeah, yeah. I think we got it. We got there.
I also would disagree with like the premise that humans would expand forever. I think like at least the way we're looking at it right now, like most developed economies have stopped like their population doubling. This seems like it's an artifact of when it was written.
Hmm.
I don't really think it's pessimistic that population reduces necessarily. I think like there are multiple problems with this, like looking at it from a real life lens. Interstellar travel takes essentially forever, right? At least from our current understanding of science, you can't in fact conquer the galaxy unless you're doing it in some other different method that doesn't involve sending humans. Because if you're sending humans, it's gonna take centuries to even get to the closest star. Yeah, but what I'm saying is you can't exponentially increase like your population just because of like limits on the speed of travel. You can't exponentially gain resources either.
Well, even if the speed of travel were limited, I think the area that it would cover is still like exponentially growing, right? So if we take the area as a sort of proxy, right? Because like the speed determines the sort of rate of expansion of a radius. I guess that's
Hmm.
not exponential, that's like quadratic,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's quadratic, but yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah. So it wouldn't be doubling, it would be the rate would just be increasing linearly.
Yeah, even if you like imagine it's increasing in volume rather than area, because I don't know how galaxies work in all honesty,
Oh,
it's
true.
probably still not, it's not exponential at least. There is no way for it to be exponential.
Yeah, it would be cubic in that case. Yeah, I know that like galaxies are two-dimensional for some reason. But yeah, I guess like if they could be stacked on top of each other, if you're going like
Yeah.
galaxy to galaxy, that would be a cubic area.
From our like current understanding of science, we are limited by the speed of light. But yeah, given there is some way to like break it, yeah, like, there are possibilities. That's like technically true, but I think like at least from like the book itself and like from our understanding of how the world works, it's that like yes, life stays stable in face of entropy because it uses energy. If it didn't have energy, then the entropy would take over. If the sun didn't give us a constant supply of energy, we could not continue to exist.
Mhm. The way I was thinking about entropy, I mean, I'm probably not too accurate about this, but I'm not like I haven't actually taken any physics courses in university. But to my understanding, like entropy is primarily like a sort of statistical phenomenon, right? Like it's that uh, more entropic states are more likely than less entropic states, and so just by like the central limit theorem, we'll reach these more entropic states sort of by definition, right?
Yeah,
And I was thinking it be said as well that like in a limited amount of space, there must be a limited amount of information.
I mean,
I guess that
I
makes
guess
a
it
lot of
depends on how you question. Hmm. There it could be infinite information if like the universe is fractal or something like that, in the sense like it's some kind of non-repeating infinitely small pattern. But
Mhm.
if it's not a fractal and like we assume that they're points, like protons or quantum points, or like if you have some particle theory of the universe, then I think there's finite information.
Mm.
Yeah. I think from like a human perspective, it definitely is a fractal. But from like a physics perspective, I think all our theories are about particles.
Mm. And I think hmm, could it be said that there is like in sort of invented knowledge, right? I mean, if we're to say that like physical laws are knowledge, it's also true, from my perspective at least, or in my opinion, that physical laws are sort of invented and instead of like discovered or described, right?
Huh. I guess if you think physical laws are invented, yeah, I guess that's a good point. You
Like
can invent made up physical laws as well. You don't need, you're not limited by the physical laws that describe the universe.
well, like physical laws do correctly describe the universe for the most part, right? But
Hmm.
the sort of way they come about is as like human created statistical models, not as like it's not like we went and like took microscopes to atoms and found them all inscribed with these things, right?
That's a fair point, yeah. I guess like if you think about it from that perspective, there would like odd infinite possible like mathematical theorems. Just skipping ahead a few stages, we do know like the central interesting point in the story is that like the computer eventually figures out a way to reverse entropy, and that is the Big Bang. So I think like that is an interesting point.
That is that the minds in the bodies were still like functioning, like the actual thinking was still going on in the brains of the bodies, but that there was like a communication method. Like I took that to be a sort of analog for some kind of internet that internet over universe or whatever, internet over galaxy. Obviously it's not using our method of copper cables, but I didn't take that as like minds already being simulated, but instead just being like tightly connected. I do think if it is like, it's probably going to be possible to, hmm, I guess like it's not really like presented thoroughly in the story itself, but yeah, I definitely imagine that the sort of merging that it describes is going to be more of a gradual process, right? Like as people use more and more technology to in order to think. I mean, to some extent, that's sort of what the story is about, right? Like people using technology in order to come up with this like important answer. Anyway, what were you gonna say? Yeah.
Me, I mostly thought like from like an immortality perspective, if all the humans had immortality, they wouldn't see a point in fusing with the machine before like, entropy kills them essentially. Another thing that I was thinking about that's like kind of related to these topics is that like, yeah, some of the last things to die out in the universe probably would be black holes. And they do have something interesting going on with information in the sense that like stuff that go into black hole, as far as we understand, lose information. So that's where you get like holographic theories of information from, which is interesting. Or like there is some way that a black hole might, at least if we think information cannot be lost, which I think is one of the physics theories, that they have to encode three-dimensional information onto a 2D surface.
Wait, why onto a 2D surface?
Yeah, so holographics essentially
Okay.
is mass divided by volume. It's possible, but yeah. You probably don't actually have infinite or like Earth for because we don't actually have a theory of physics that incorporates both general or like gravity and quantum physics, right? So black holes are at the edge of what our physics could even theoretically describe.
Hmm. Yeah, I've got no clue how black holes work.
In the identity is more important to me than my ability to think. What about you, Liam?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this a lot. I think it's like sort of one of the core points in here, right? Like at every step, even you can see that in the names of the characters that are talking to each other, they sort of lose parts of like what we would consider human identity in favor of this sort of, I don't know what exactly to call it. I think of it as like a very like rationalist way of seeing existing, right? Like on one end, you can sort of see the maximalist identity framework, right? Where it's like these are people and they have their sort of biological organisms and they'll only be in any way once, right? Like in fact, the fact that the characters were aging was noted. I think like it was referenced that the guy was like pulling his hairs out looking at the thing, right? This is something that in particular gives somebody identity, right? Like that they were born at a specific time and that they're getting older since then. And so these steps that like both make human life like more rational or constant also remove, like by necessity, remove human identity, right? Like making humans ageless removes that element where he like is running his hands through his hair or whatever as it thins. Uh, or the people in later stories lose their names, and the people here sort of fuse with the computer. And I think to some extent, this also has to do with the increasing loss in like human utility, right? Uh, like I think it's sort of the story is like broadly anti-humanist in my opinion, like, to a surprising degree. I don't know to what extent it was intentional. Like I should probably read more of Asimov's works. Like I really only read a few sections of like iRobot and then this, but to me like the whole story came across as very like anti-humanist. Like there's really nothing that the human characters do, right? uh Eventually the computer even makes it like more computers, and all the humans essentially do is are like beg it for answers to its problems. Like at one point I think with the family that was like going and like colonizing a new galaxy, not a new galaxy, going to like a new planet in their own galaxy. Like they were sort of reliant on the computer for all their answers. Yeah. So in that way, because like the story is anti-humanist, like the shedding of human identity, uh, the reason that it's like somehow not a loss but a gain is because we're removing that human element. Uh, I think the story is equally sensible if there are like many different competing computers, right? Like if they had to choose a model uh, to ask a question each time, right? I don't think any part of the story would be diminished, in my opinion.
And uh,
Mhm. I think like yeah, the value system established by the story almost is I mean if we were to interpret a value system from the story, it's like each computer sort of replaces the last because it supersedes it, right? Like the previous computer is rendered obsolete and the new computer is like a complete replace it's superior because it's like better as a computer, right? So to the extent that like there's a sort of logical hole in that like the computers haven't treated the humans the same way that it treats the other superseded computers, right? I think yeah, the story is definitely assuming like a very high degree of alignment to the extent that I think it's sort of implied that the only reason it's trying to solve the problem is because humans have asked it, right? Uh, I think it's like strange how or I guess like, maybe we're not meant to interrogate the sort of value system of the computer here, but to me it's strange that like the computer found a way to exist outside of physical reality, but it cares so much about physical reality, right? Like it still does all this stuff to